How's it going, everybody? Jackson Fuller here, and you are listening to the latest episode of Hoggin the Mic. It is Wednesday, October 2nd. We'll bring Hutch in just a moment to recap Arkansas's tough, close, nail-biting, all the adjectives that have kind of cursed the Hogs over a long run in Arlington. Lost to Texas A&M last week, and also preview the upcoming game against top 5 team in Tennessee. A lot to get to on the football front, but perhaps we'll also dive into a little bit of basketball and baseball. We got to talk to John Calipari yesterday on Tuesday, and the baseball team is somehow surprisingly really close to wrapping up fall ball. So we'll give some thoughts on both of those programs, as well as touching on this football team and what's going to come next for Sam Pittman, and really a critical couple months coming up for the Razorbacks. So let's go ahead, play that rock music, bring in my co-host Andrew Hutchinson, and let's get this latest episode of Hoggin the Mic started. Hutch, how's it going? Are you excited to, the football players talk about it, the coaches talk about it. Are you excited to sleep in your own bed this week for a football game? We're not on the road where, the grind of us traveling is over. The reporters, it's time for us to take advantage and be on our A game, sleeping in our own bed this week.
Well, I know my wife and my two kids are very excited for that. I missed them over this past weekend going to Arlington, so I'll still be working, so I won't get to spend a ton of time with them. But hey, at least I'll have all day Saturday leading up to a night game, which I know people are excited about. And as you said, sleep in my own bed, so it's gonna be nice. I very much enjoy these home games.
Absolutely. We'll talk a ton about Tennessee today, but first, of course, let's go back in time a bit, recap the loss to Texas A&M on this past Saturday. As I said in the intro, 21-17 Aggies. I mean, really, it's a game when you kind of take a step back and you think about what transpired, Hutch. I feel like the right team won the game. I think Texas A&M is just a lot better on both offensive and defensive line, and that kind of advantage really, played itself out over the course of 4 quarters. But at the same time, the Aggies didn't take their first lead of the game until there were 9 minutes left. I mean, Arkansas was playing from ahead or tied the entire game. There was a moment there, when Kyle Ramsey made the field goal in the 4th quarter. I really did think Arkansas was going to pull this game out and end the Arlington era on the high. Just not meant to be. I mean, when you look back, I know you wrote a story about the 4 biggest keys of the loss, but what do you think the biggest reason is Arkansas just wasn't able to close the door on Texas A&M?
Well, first, I'm going to say, Jax, I know this is only the second Southwest Classic you've ever covered, but don't worry. You saw this game. You've seen the previous 10 or however many it is, because that same exact game has unfolded so many times. I mean, I joked with Bob Holt afterward. I said, I wonder if people would notice if I just took previous year's story and subbed out, Taylon Green for KJ Jefferson, or, Sam Pittman for Brett Bielema, or something like that, because it seems like this has been the case every time down there, but I digress. As far as this specific game, I really feel, and I wrote about this in my piece, as you mentioned, the field position, that's such an old school thing to talk about, when it comes to football. It's a field position game and everything. This isn't, the 1920s or whatever, when people are punting on 3rd down for field position purposes, but it was a very much field position type game. Arkansas, it felt like every single drive was starting, at their 10-yard line or even worse. And when you've got an offense that isn't exactly humming right now, that just makes it that much harder to score points, and that's what we saw unfold. And also on the flip side of that, Texas A&M usually had decent field position, and even when you've got a defense playing as well as Arkansas's was, you're eventually going to give up points. I mean, one of those touchdowns A&M scored was from 10 yards out, after the fumble, which gave them excellent field position. So to me, that the story of the game was field position. That's what really killed Arkansas. Now, what led to the field position, we can talk about all that, but the root, the overarching theme, in my opinion, was field position.
Yeah, and I think, we'll get to it. I mentioned it already, but I just think that the play up front was it was too obvious, in an SEC game. I know every time you watch a football game, one team is probably going to be better along the line of scrimmage. I mean, maybe one team's better on the offensive line, but then when the other team has the ball, they kind of control it. It just felt for 4 quarters like there was far too big of a gap. And I think, give Texas A&M credit when Arkansas did pin Texas A&M the one time. They got the ball down on the one to off of a Devin Bale punt. Texas A&M did a really smart first down play, just a quick rollout and a 10-yard hitch. I mean, the Arkansas cornerbacks had been playing off receivers all season. This wasn't just a Texas A&M thing. We saw it against Oklahoma State. We've seen it against, we saw it against Auburn. And now we saw it against Texas A&M. They were off, quick pass, first down. They're out of the shadow of their own end zone. But then the next play is a huge run. So, Texas A&M had the offensive line where it could overcome the poor field position. Of course, it only had to that one time, I think. But when push came to shove, Texas A&M had the answers. Arkansas simply did not. If they got out, to the 25, it felt like a win that they, were able to kind of escape that, deep in their own territory and get out there and maybe try and, put Texas A&M not quite at the 50, but 30. Anyways, it just to me, I think field position was the difference maker in terms of game flow and numbers and stuff like that. But, man for man, I'm starting to get a little nervous about this Arkansas team up front. More so in the offensive line than the defensive line. But I did think the Arkansas defensive line, last week, and this was another thing you wrote about, that there were some backups in there on the kind of a very critical on the touchdown drive where Texas A&M took the lead. And you know what? I think it was a mistake in hindsight, but after the Oklahoma State game, I was asking for Sam to play more players. That Arkansas guys got tired defensively in the fourth quarter against Oklahoma State. So now he plays more players on a critical drive and it comes back to bite him. It just feels like this team has some major flaws that when everything, when Taylon's making plays and Petrino's calling a good game plan, and same for Travis Williams, they can overcome some of those fatal flaws. But Texas A&M just really exposed maybe the difference in talent from a team that consistently recruits 5 stars to campus and a team that just hasn't done that.
Yeah, I mean, the depth, I think, is stuff that you and I have both talked about as an issue dating back to fall camp. I mean, that's something that we've said, we were mostly talking about it from an injury standpoint. If something happened to one of your starters injury-wise, boy, that's bad news. But honestly, it's the same thing if you're rotating. But and like you said, yes, they probably should have rotated more against Oklahoma State. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with doing that earlier in the game or even in the third quarter, whatever. But when you had just taken a 17-14 lead in the fourth quarter, why would you not have your best dudes out there? I mean, Landon Jackson, that's the other thing too, is Landon Jackson was on the sideline and he had just played what may have been his best series of the season. I mean, he had a sack and tackle for loss. I mean, he was everywhere. He was truly, making the impact that we thought he was going to be as a preseason All-SEC guy. And he had to watch from the sideline there until the final play. I think it was an 8-play drive, and they had the backups in there for 7 plays, including a 3rd and 4 play where Danny Saili had the running back either at or behind the line of scrimmage, and he didn't make the tackle, and it was a 23-yard run, and next thing you know, Texas A&M's in the end zone. So that was really frustrating if you're an Arkansas fan, because it's not just that series. There's been other personnel decisions throughout the year that just have been really head-scratching. I mean, go back to Cross Johnson being one of the guys in charge of blocking the gunner against Oklahoma State, runs into your punter not once but twice, and the second time it happens, it's a critical, turnover and everything. So it's just those kind of things I think are starting to really frustrate Arkansas fans, because it's not just one isolated incident. It's multiple kind of weird personnel decisions throughout the season.
Yeah, and as they should. I mean, look, Landon Jackson spoke with us after the game. He had 2 sacks. He was a disruptive force. Great performance. He said he was frustrated about the loss, but he said he also mentioned how he was able to, when he wasn't playing, was on the sideline and the Arkansas offense was on the field, he could appreciate the Texas A&M defensive line's play. Well, I just pulled up the numbers from PFF, and Texas A&M's 2 top defensive linemen, Shamar Turner and Nick Scorton, who, they have him listed as an outside linebacker, but Scorton plays on the line. They both played 57 and 55 snaps each out of a possible 74. Landon Jackson played 46 out of 62, and Eric Gregory played 42 out of 62. I guess when you like the snap, like how the snaps that they played out of the possible one are pretty much the same, but I just think like the way that Arkansas's roster is built, like you got to play more snaps for Landon Jackson. As crazy as that is, I like Landon Jackson, on 75% energy is probably better than almost every other defensive end. I think Eric Gregory is having a pretty strong year. But one thing I would say though is I think we haven't gotten what we expected out of Cameron Ball, Nico Davier, and Anton Junkaj, and maybe that's played a part in the decision making there on that drive where it was like these guys, those three, I think they're playing okay, but they're not dominating. And maybe in Pittman's mind, it was like, hey, a fresh Charlie Collins and fresh Danny Saili is better than that. They got it wrong though at the end of the day, and it's I can make the excuses that I've made over the past 10 minutes, however long we've been recording, but those excuses don't matter to the end result, especially in a big hot seat year for Sam Pittman. What do you think about the offense? I think we talked a good bit about the defense and the special teams with field position, but second straight week it hasn't looked great. I think that this Texas A&M defense might be one of the better defenses they play all year. Like I think there's a good chance Arkansas looks better this week against Tennessee, at least offensively. But what's your level of concern right now for that unit? Because it feels like we're teetering, and if one or two things go a little sideways here against Tennessee and maybe even LSU after the bye week, we could be back to a point where there's just no confidence, faith overall, especially on the offensive line, very similar to where we were last year.
Yeah, man, it's definitely starting to be a little bit more of a concern than it was. I've said all along, like, hey, Arkansas has Bobby Petrino. Like that is a major point that I thought was a positive for Arkansas, and I still do. Like I still think Bobby Petrino is a brilliant offensive mind, but I just don't know if he has the necessary horses needed to do what he's wanting to do offensively. I mean, you think back to when he was the head coach at Arkansas, they had some damn good players, and I just don't think the players they have right now are at that same caliber. And plus, I heard a this point being made, I believe by Clay Henry, legendary sports writer in Arkansas, brought this up, and it made a lot of sense. Like, everyone remembers how good Ryan Mallett and Tyler Wilson were in this offense, to this Bobby Petrino offense. But neither of them started the first year they were in the offense. Ryan Mallett had to sit out because he redshirted after, from a transfer. Then Tyler Wilson had to wait his turn before he played. And even then, even when he played in relief against Auburn that one time, had been in the system. And so they had time to learn the offense. Casey Dick, when Bobby Petrino took over in 2008, he struggled at times. Like he put up decent numbers and stuff, but like he struggled, and he actually got benched for a game. And it's because it's not easy to learn this offense. And so I think Taylor Green is going through some of those growing pains. Not to mention he already has the accuracy concerns and things like that. I just keep thinking like, man, maybe Taylor Green, if they can keep this staff together, if Sam Pittman can do enough to save his job, and Bobby Petrino comes back and Taylor Green comes back, I think Taylor Green could make significant strides from this year to next year. You just got to get to next year, and that's what I'm a little bit worried about is can he improve enough over the second half of the season, or what's about to be the halfway point, to kind of show that he's the guy and is capable of doing that. That's kind of what I'm concerned about. And as you mentioned, the offensive line not really giving him a ton of time is also a little bit of a concern as well.
Yeah, it's the time, it's the snap issues. It's like it just feels like anytime a team blitzes one guy, like a delayed blitz, Arkansas doesn't have an answer for it. And that's on everybody. I think it's on the offensive line. It's also on Taylor Green probably for, he plays a role in picking up blitzes and, shouting out who's coming from where. And it's on Bobby Petrino. I mean, like at some point, Petrino knew what he signed up for, right? Like he would have been stupid not to have known, like, you might only get 1 year at this if things don't go well. And so I don't think, I don't think this is his mindset, but if his mindset is, oh, well, I got to stick with my offense and the first year's tough, we'll get to the second year, then that's the wrong approach. I don't think that is the approach. I'm just saying, like, there needs to be some changes overall schematically somehow. I don't know exactly what those changes are. Last year, when it got really bad for the offensive line, we kept asking about it. We kept hearing Sam say, we got to roll the pocket. We got to roll the pocket. Well, they rolled the pocket and nothing really happened, because when you roll the pocket, you take away one entire half of the field, and the defense can, pretty much knows where the ball's going. If you roll right, your ball's going right. So there's no easy solution. I think maybe if we want to take a glass half full approach, with your logic about just needing some time, maybe the bye week will do this team good to really sit down, watch the film, and have 2 weeks to kind of change things. And Sam has shown a great ability to come off of a bye week and win football games. So I don't know. I'm kind of hoping that, if I'm thinking about this as an Arkansas fan, I'm hoping that Texas A&M was just the best defense we'll play all year, especially up front, and we're going to be better than that, and we'll have 2 weeks to prepare before some winnable games. Let's just get through this Tennessee one, because, oof, Hutch. I mean, we can move on to that now. I don't really see it. I'm not seeing a light of a victory, a path to victory, if you will, for Arkansas this weekend.
I mean, sure, there's a path. It's just not exactly a clear one. We have a story up on our site by Adam Ford. He's a big analytics guy and did a really nice deep dive on kind of how they can do it. And I mean, he acknowledges, like, it's not going to be easy. Like, they've got to be able to protect Taylor Green, and this is a defensive line that is scary good, and they're deep. I mean, we talk about how non-deep Arkansas is, the difference between the first and second unit. And I was looking at, I think Mason Choate from Hogbeat sent me a screenshot that showed me, like, the snap count differences between Arkansas's starting defensive line and Tennessee's starting defensive line. And it's crazy. Like, it's a drastic difference. I think a couple of starters hadn't even played 100 snaps yet. It's wild. And so they're going to be fresh and they're good. It's going to be an issue. You've got to figure out a way to slow those guys down. And I don't have a ton of confidence in that. Maybe the defense I feel a little bit more confident in, just because they have been playing so well. And Tennessee, while the offense gets all the attention, it's their defense that I think has been kind of their calling card this year. They have been really, really good on that side of the ball. So not a whole lot of confidence, just to sum it all up shortly.
I think, simply put, Tennessee has to play poorly for Arkansas to win this game. If Tennessee plays well, I don't think Arkansas has got a chance. And how do you get that? How do you force Tennessee to play poorly? Well, you force a redshirt freshman quarterback into some mistakes that he hasn't shown thus far in his collegiate career, but it's certainly a possibility. I mean, the one thing that I'll say too, about, like, yeah, the defensive line is really deep, and that's kind of why but they also haven't, they haven't really played the starters in the second half except for one game this year, I mean, maybe a couple drives here and there against NC State and such, but Tennessee has been in one close game, and even that, like, it was Heupel came out and admitted he was conservative offensively because he knew they were going to win the game. He didn't have to do too much. So maybe it's like you put Tennessee in an uncomfortable position where it's a close game late, and you get after Yamalavia. Is that how you Yamaliava, right?
Nico, that's what I'm going with.
Dang it! I really wanted to nail that today, but I've written it a bunch today, but I haven't nailed the pronunciation. Just that, Nico. I don't know. I think the biggest key is they got to run the football on offense. They got to keep Tennessee's offense off the field, and they have to. The running game has been such a strength for this team. They abandoned it, I think, a little too early against Texas A&M. They have to run the football. If they don't, they've got no shot.
Yeah, Jaquindon Jackson needs more than 10 carries. I know it wasn't going super well for him. I know he was kind of in and out. His health has kind of been an off and on thing since as long as, I don't know, I can't remember back to the spring, but I know for sure in fall camp, it was like, he would be out there, he'd participate, but then he'd get dinged up. Been that way throughout pretty much the entire season. But if he can stay out there on the field, I think that would be huge, because I think he's a an all SEC caliber back when he's healthy. And then, of course, I liked what I saw from Braylon Russell a little bit. Get him involved more. So, yeah, they have to run the ball, and that also keeps defenses honest, and maybe could help open up the passing game a little bit. But I mean, I guess the flip side is also true. Talen's, when he does throw it, needs to be accurate to keep the defense honest, where they're not just stacking the box. I mean, it's hard to run if they've got 8 in the box or something. So they just have to be efficient with the ball. They can't just go 3 and out each time, because it would be a very long day for the defense.
Yeah, I think 41 passes by Talon against A&M and only 30 runs as a team. 2 of those runs were Devin Bale on special teams, and 3 of those runs carry stats were Talon Green sacks, and there were a few other Talon Green runs that came off passing plays. The Jaquindon Jackson injury issue is he's not missing a whole game, but he's missing a drive, or he's hampered, or there's been some I think there's been times where it's some communication issues where it's he wants to play, or he thinks he can play, and then he has to come out at the last second, and Arkansas has to burn a timeout because of a late substitution. I think Jaquindon has to get at least 15 to 18 carries, and Braylon Russell's got to get at least 10 carries. I think you need to start running Braylon earlier. Maybe it's the second drive of the game, hey, Jaquindon, you take a seat for this drive, and this is all Braylon, no matter what. If it's 3rd and 2, it's Braylon's time. And that, just because right now Jaquindon, he is so vital to this offense, and he has consistently shown that, once a game, he's going to have to leave with some sort of minor injury. He's tough enough to come back and play through it, but that's part of the equation now. And I think it'd be smart on the coaching staff to maybe give him some breaks earlier in the game than waiting till he does kind of get a little banged up.
And it'd be nice too if you could maybe figure out a way to carve out some carries for R-Dub. Rashad Dubinion, I mean, he was suspended this past week. But he's back now. Even before he was suspended, though, he was kind of buried on the depth chart. But I still think he's more durable and more of a viable option than, say, Rodney Hill. Rodney Hill, I feel like, could be used in special situations and certain packages and whatever. But I just see R-Dub as maybe more of a viable option as a guy to get some carries, to take something off of. If you don't want your freshman out there, true freshman Braylon Russell, and you need to give Jaquindon a blow, work in R-Dub. I think he's had some good moments over the years, so I do think it would be vital to give Jaquindon some breaks, but don't limit him to just 10 carries. That's too few. You don't need to run him 30 times. He's not like Ollie Gordon last year where you just run the ball every single play. But he's a guy that needs to be out there when the game's on the line.
Yeah, for sure. And what I'll also say is something that I think Arkansas has had good success with this year, but they haven't really dedicated much effort into it, is the screen game and running backs catching passes out of the backfield. I mean, Jaquindon's got 8, but Rodney, we thought would be more of a pass catching threat, only 6. R-Dub 2, Braylon Russell only 1. They've got to get more creative and getting more targets involved, and they did a good job of that in the early against Texas A&M. I thought Isaac Tesla had the big touchdown, but he also had a nice catch. I think in the first half, they got Isaiah Satania going a little bit early, and that's kind of when the offense had some success. Maybe I'm wrong on that, because their success came off of a 75-yard touchdown and a fake punt drive. So, but it just feels like they've got to find ways to diversify the targets away from Andrew Armstrong. We've talked about Tesla getting more opportunities, but maybe it's hey, let's call some design throws to the running back out of the backfield, whether that's screens, short routes, flats, just to get, see Talon Green get some completions under his belt on some easy targets. And clearly the backs, are some of the most explosive playmakers on this team right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. It'd be good to just build up the confidence of Talon Green, because apparently his confidence is taking a little hit. That's what Sam Pittman said on Monday. It'd be nice to, for him to see some, hey, these are some completions, let's get the going, and then maybe try throwing the ball down the field. And I liked some of the stuff that they did with Isaiah Satania, getting him involved in the screen game a little bit. I don't think any of them were like super big plays, but they resulted in positive yardage. I think they even ran a jet sweep with him. I wouldn't mind seeing that a little bit more because I think he also is just a very explosive player, just like we are talking about the running backs. So, yeah, I think just kind of diversifying the offense, diversifying the targets, where it's not just Andrew Armstrong every single play, which he's great. That's awesome. But you need to spread it around a little bit so that way, they can't just double and triple team them the whole game.
Agreed. You got a score prediction? I think I'm going 34-20 in this one, Tennessee, which is just right around the spread. I wouldn't be surprised if it's worse than that, but I do think Arkansas's defense is going to at least hang around here.
Yeah, I think I told a Tennessee writer yesterday that I think I'm going to pick 31-21 Tennessee, but I think it's not going to be that close, if that makes sense. I think Arkansas is just kind of going to hang around a little bit, maybe score a late touchdown, maybe a backdoor cover, something along those lines. But I think Tennessee is going to control it pretty much from the start.
As the legendary Bob Holt has been pointing out this week, Tennessee is very good in the first quarter. Arkansas has to find a way to stay within touching distance there if they want any shot at pulling off this upset. So let's move to the other two sports, basketball and baseball. We don't have to dive too much into them, but we got to talk to Calipari yesterday. What was your biggest takeaway from that press conference? And maybe what's just on the front of your mind when we think about basketball season getting started in about a month's time right now?
I think my biggest takeaway is that Cal was totally trying to maybe tamper expectations a little bit, especially right out of the gate, and that's understandably so. I mean, he's not waiting around to really dive into the schedule. I mean, you get Kansas and TCU as exhibitions, and then you host Lipscomb for your opener, but then you go to Dallas and face Baylor, a top 5 team. So we're going to find out a lot about this team early on, and I think and I think this is something he said a lot at Kentucky too, and a lot of that was because one, he had tough schedules, but also he had really young teams. It's like, hey, what we are now is not going to be what we are later, and I think that was kind of the message he was getting across with a lot of what he said yesterday. Because as we've learned, the man can really talk and fill up time, and he has certain talking points that he wants to get across no matter what we ask him. And I just felt like that was a recurring theme throughout the presser was, hey, we're going to get punched in the mouth early. He wants to see how his team responds, and then of course they'll make adjustments as the season goes on.
Two things stuck out to me. One, I think just DJ Wagner, the confidence that Cal has in him. I think it's safe to expect a big year from him. I don't think I quite realized the extent of his injury last year and just how much that played probably a role in what was an underwhelming freshman season for a top 5 recruit who probably was thinking he'd be one and done in college basketball and now is on his second school. But I think that he's going to be such an important player for them because he's really the only pure point guard on the roster. He's going to get a ton of minutes and have a ton of opportunities. It was good to see Cal have a lot of confidence in him and kind of express like this guy's ready to go. Two, I know Cal wasn't concerned about them being banged up. I'm concerned. Like they've got 9 players that are going to be meaningful contributors. If 2 guys are banged up at all, they're in a world of hurt. Like I don't know. I don't know how you took that, but like him saying, "Oh, that's the least of my worries," is like him. I took that as this is more of a worry than he's letting on. He's just not wanting to maybe talk about it at early October when the season's a month away.
Yeah, I did notice that he didn't want to talk specifics. I kind of figured that would be the case. That's not just Calipari. That's all coaches across all sports pretty much. But because I mean we've seen the picture where Big Z has his foot in the boot. I think Jonas Idu also had his foot in the boot in that photo just from earlier this month or about a month ago. So yeah, it's a little bit of an issue if it lingers into the season. You just got to hope that they stay healthy and that they've got enough guys to weather the storm if they do have a rash of injuries.
I think no matter what, though, this team, their ceiling is astronomically high, and that's something that I keep coming back to. Is like Big Z is probably the third big guy on this team, and there's undoubtedly a world where he's a first round pick next year. 7'2" center, good passer, can shoot the three. Like, their best like high ceiling NBA players are probably the freshmen and the young guys, and then they've got two older guys in John L. Davis and Jonas Adu, who have had just a world of success at the college level. It's, I say that I'm concerned about the injuries and stuff and the depth, but at the same time, like, if this team does figure it out, it's going to be a Sweet 16, Elite 8 level team, and it's not has not been the case for Calipari in his final years at Kentucky. So maybe I'm expecting a little bit too much there, but I do think like there's a world where this is a very, very special basketball season for Arkansas.
The talent's there. I mean, as you said, there's the 9-man rotation is small to have 9 players, but all 9 of them, I can foresee a situation in which they get drafted. Maybe not all first round picks, because a guy like John L. Davis is old or older, and probably not like a super big NBA prospect. But if he goes out and has a best case scenario, like National Player of the Year type year, why wouldn't he be at least a second round pick? So I mean, everyone on this roster is a guy that you could foresee a situation in which he gets drafted. And I don't know how many other years you could say that about Arkansas. That they had 9 guys that if everything goes perfectly, if they play up to their potential, that could happen. And I think when you get NBA caliber guys, that was the other thing John Calipari said the other day. Was like people accuse him of just caring about NBA, producing NBA players and stuff like that. So, well, yeah, because the more NBA players you have, the more likely you are going to win, and that's exactly true. And very anxious to see kind of how it all plays out because of that ceiling that you mentioned.
I love this lane for Calipari. Like that he can what a glorious lane to exist in as a head coach of a college program, that he's accused of not caring about winning because all he cares about is making his players and their families like millions of dollars in the NBA. He still experienced a bunch of winning in his life, and not only that, but his track record of getting guys to the NBA helps him get more guys to his program, to the NBA, and to winning. It's just funny, like thinking about like how this guy was kind of viewed 5, 6, 7 years ago, and how he's viewed now outside of Lexington. I think it's an interesting like narrative shift that he really hasn't done too much work on. It's just kind of every year he produces draft picks, and I guess one thing that has changed or come more to the light is just the love that his former players have for him, and like the way they're to hear Kentucky guys now kind of speak fondly of Arkansas because Cal is there, and not we're cheering for Cal and that's my guy. It's I think that's something that I guess is maybe that's how people have started to change their minds on Calipari. But man, if they struggle this year, the national media and everyone is gonna gobble that up. I'm just warning Arkansas fans now. You guys it's gonna be a fun year if you're good, and if you're bad, it is not going to be a fun year because everybody will be happy to celebrate Calipari leaving Kentucky and struggling. Not saying that's gonna happen, but just be prepared if it does.
I would be surprised if they're bad. I really would. I mean, barring catastrophic injuries and stuff like that. Because if you just look at his track record, even yes, they've had the early exits in the NCAA tournament the last few years, but like look at his year by year. I mean, yes, he had the really bad season where it's like right out of COVID, the 2020-21 season. Take that out, they finished top 3 in the SEC basically every year. I mean, they are right there. And so, I mean, he is remarkably consistent. And before this last 5 years, he was also doing stuff in the NCAA tournament, making the Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final 4 pretty consistently. So, can he do that at Arkansas? I'm not sure, but I think the infrastructure's there. The NIL is there. The roster's there. So I personally have a lot of reason for optimism when it comes to his potential for success here at Arkansas.
I do as well. I think they're going to be good this year, but I will say I do see a scenario where this is like, I mean, he said it yesterday, his programs take 2 or 3 years to get to where they want or where he wants it. I could see this year being kind of like a just I mean, this team does not. This team has NBA talent, like you said. I agree. All 9 guys could get drafted, but they also don't have like one guy that's 100% a lottery pick right now, and that's something he had every year at Kentucky. Was that kind of NBA high level talent? So I think they're going to be good, and I think I think one of the reasons for that is just their age and like the 2 guys that I've mentioned today, Davis and Adu, like that kind of elevates their floor because of their experience and talent in college basketball. But it is a little bit different of a Calipari team, and it's in a completely different program. So we have to, we have to see it up front, right in front of our eyes before I'm exactly just calling this a winning season right now. Let's get to baseball real quick and wrap up there. Obviously, Arkansas has its fall classic this Friday. They just announced that they're going to have. Are they also calling that the fall classic, or what are they calling the series against
Just
Oklahoma State?
exhibition games. I
2
don't know
exhibition games against Oklahoma State next weekend. Hutch, what's been your biggest takeaway from, we haven't been neither of us have been to every scrimmage, but we've got some stats and everything. Just what's your biggest takeaway from this fall for Arkansas?
I think Dave Van Horn was not bullshitting us when he said that they're going to do more offensively, not just sit back and rely on the long ball. If you go to some of these scrimmages, it's something that I've been covering these fall scrimmages and I'm talking about the intra-squad scrimmages where they just scrimmage amongst themselves. I've been going to these for the last couple of years now, and this is the first year that they've done this situational work in these scrimmages. And by that I mean they'll start an inning with a runner on first and second, and they'll send somebody up, and his job is to get the bunt down and move them over, or put the ball in play and drive in a run if you got runners on the corners, less than 2 outs. That is a significant change. They're running a lot more. They're stealing bases. I mean, I think I added it up the other day. I think they've already had like 15 more stolen base attempts through the first 10 inter squad scrimmages than they had through all 15 last fall. They are running significantly more. Now, I'm not going to say they're going to try to steal 200 bases this year or anything like that, but they're figuring out who can and who can't. Right now it seems like Nolan Souza may be their best base stealer. And he's got like 10 stolen bases and 10 scrimmages. That's pretty good. So that to me is my biggest takeaway, is just how Dave Van Horn meant what he said when he said he's going to be changing some things up, because I've seen it with my own 2 eyes. They have made changes already to kind of how they're going to approach this offense. And again, that's not to say they don't have power, because they still have some power. I mean, Brent Iredale, the Australian, is going to be really fun to watch for people, I think. So, and some other guys too. The Hava we know about. His brother is also starting to really turn a corner. He got off to a really slow start this fall, but I think he's homered in 4 straight scrimmages, something like that, and he's got maybe the best exit velos on the team, according to Dave Van Horn. So they've got guys that can still hit it out of the park, but I don't think they're going to have to rely solely on that to put runs on the board.
Yeah, the steals, small ball, it's all obvious. You just go to a scrimmage. It's crazy how much they're working on it. You kind of stepped on my biggest kind of takeaway from this fall. I don't know if it's the biggest takeaway, but it's my most surprise. I just think like Nolan Souza has to play this year. And I thought coming into the fall, after seeing like what all happened to the transfer portal and everything, I was like, man, there's a world where that guy is like the first guy off the bench, or a guy that comes and starts a 1 game a weekend to keep his bat not so rusty, and give other guys opportunities to rest and everything. But he leads the team in stolen bases. He's second on the team in runs by our unofficial stats. I think he's third in on base percentage. And, he's played, the guy that leads a lot of the categories, Rocco Pepe, has only had about half the at-bats as everybody else. Seems like he might be, dealing with something, but nothing major because he's still playing a ton. I just think like Nolan, they got Cam Kozel from Vanderbilt, and I think he's probably the better infielder and might end up being the starting second baseman. But man, Dave's got to find a way to get Nolan Souza in the lineup, and maybe that's DH. But then you're cutting off the room for one of the extra outfielders to get a DH spot, or Kuhio Aloy. I mean, the depth offensively this year is going to be a lot better than it was last year. I don't know if, how much better the run producing and everything will be, but I think that they're going to have a lot more options. You're not going to have Will Edmondson and Ty Wilmsmeyer like bats starting most of your games. And for me, Nolan Souza, his development has been really, really impressive, and hopefully he continues it over to the spring, because if he does, that's just another really valuable homegrown piece that's going to make an impact.
Yeah, there's a scenario in which Arkansas, their starting infield features 3 Hawaiians and an Australian, which would be pretty unique. I mean, because Vaheva's locked in. He's going to be your starting shortstop. Then Nolan Souza at second base potentially, as you said, and then Kuhio Aloy, Vaheva's brother. With him coming on like he has, he could be your starting first baseman. And then I mentioned Brent Iredale. He's the Australian. He could be your starting third baseman. It looks like he's probably the front runner right there. So that would be pretty cool. And then you also have potentially a Canadian in center field in Charles Davalin. So that would be kind of an interesting, unique kind of thing you don't really see a whole lot. If we want to be, Debbie Downers here for a minute, let's talk about the pitching situation. I've got concerns about Zach Root, the heralded transfer from East Carolina. He's struggled quite a bit. Arkansas, the bats are hitting them pretty well. And I think, talking to some guys who were actually there at his last scrimmage, his velo wasn't quite where you expected it to be. I'm not insinuating that he's hurt or anything, but I mean, if he doesn't get that back, the guy that a lot of us thought could potentially be your Friday night guy, I don't know. I don't know if he's going to start, especially when you look at how good Gage Wood has pitched. I mean, that's a guy people kind of wrote off because it's like, oh, well, they got this guy from East Carolina. They got this guy from Ohio State. They got Gabe Gackle. People kind of forget about Gage Wood. He pitched pretty well down the stretch last year, and he has been absolutely dominant so far in the fall. And so I think Gage Wood has locked down one of the weekend rotation spots as of right now. So that leaves 2 left, and Gackle's pitched pretty well too. If he takes one of them, then you only got 1 spot. There's very little room for error there for a guy like Zach Root, and we need to see him pitch a little bit better. I'm hoping to see him Friday night in the Fall Classic, because I would like to see it with my own 2 eyes, kind of how he looks, and see if I should really actually be panicking or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think if the season started tomorrow, Gackle's my Friday night guy. Landon Beetleshees, and I still don't know if that's how you pronounce his name, but one of Landon Beetleshees and Gage Wood are the other 2 weekend starters. Gackle, I think Gackle's the Friday night guy, and I think that maybe there'll be some competition, and we won't be 100% sure of that. But I feel like by the time we get to February, he's the dude. He's the guy on the staff that has the best stuff. He did it over and over for Arkansas again. He gave up 4 runs in his first inning of the fall, and he gave up 4 earned runs in the.
Didn't he give up 3 straight homers to start the fall or something?
He gave up back-to-back jacks for the first inning of fall, and I think he gave up another run in that inning, and I don't think he's pitched 5 other innings and hasn't given up a run since. That I saw him 2 weeks ago, I guess. Was it 2 weeks ago? Yeah, the weekend of the Auburn game. I went out to the scrimmage on Friday, and he was just lights out. I mean, I guess it's fair to be a little concerned about Root, but this pitching staff still has so much depth. I mean, we haven't seen, Hunter Dietz, Colin Fisher coming back from injury. Cole Gibbler, the freshman, looks really, really good so far. We haven't seen much of Christian Fauch. He's going to be a bullpen guy, of course, but I think they're going to be able to find 3 to 4 reliable starting pitchers this year just based off that depth. And maybe it comes in like waves and spurts where like, okay, one guy is good the first half of the year and then another guy comes on and takes his place. But I think like where last year they really only had trust in one starting pitcher at the end of the year, I would be really surprised if that's the case next year just because of the depth that this team has. And but again, personally, I think it starts with Gackle, and then everyone else kind of follows in behind him. The other concern for me, if we're going to keep this Debbie Downer approach, and maybe we shouldn't, but we got me going on, is I have not liked at all what I've seen from Will McIntyre this fall, and I'm hoping maybe it's him working on things like last year stunk. Let's work on some things to kind of change it, and this is the time to work on it. But it looks like more of the same from where he left off this spring, and I don't think Arkansas needs him because of that pitching depth that I've said and that we talked about. But man, if he could be anything close to what he was first half of last season, this bullpen goes from really good to, again, one of the best in the country.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Will, I almost think he's kind of a gamer. Like, I feel like he's better when the lights are on. Now, of course, the way last year ended, I think, is definitely a reason for concern. But I think he's a guy that will look better once the season actually gets going. I feel like that's happened in the past with him. So even if he's not as good as he was the first half of last year, because the first half of last year he was damn near as dominant as Hagen Smith was, which is crazy to say. Like, he didn't have quite the strikeout numbers, but everything else was pretty comparable. I think for 1 week he actually took ERA lead over Hagen. But if he could just split the difference between how good he was the first half and how bad he was the second half, that's a very valuable piece to have, especially when you throw in the fact that he's such a veteran guy who's been around. He's pitched in a College World Series. He's pitched on teams that have won the SEC. So I think his presence is going to be big. And similar along those same lines, Dylan Carter, a guy that did not pitch well at all last year coming back from his injury. But his velo is up. He seems to be pitching better in these scrimmages. He's going to have a role. Now, I don't think he's going to be a guy that pitches a ton of innings, but he's going to be a guy that has a role and maybe pitches in some high leverage situations throughout the season. As another older veteran guy. So yeah, those are a couple other names I feel like need to be mentioned. And I'll echo your sentiment on Cole Gibbler, the freshman. He has looked very, very good. He's maybe not as heralded as Carson Wiggins, the brother of Jackson Wiggins, who throws heat just like his brother, more polished than his brother was at this point of the year, but his career. But I think Cole Gibbler's even more polished than that, and a guy that maybe doesn't overpower you with his stuff, but is just a really, really good pitcher, which is just what Dave Van Horn loves.
Yeah, similar feeling to Colin Fisher last year coming in alongside Hunter Dietz, where Gibbler might just be the more polished product right now coming out of high school than Andrews, who might have the higher ceiling. And Kel Busby, too, has looked pretty good as a freshman. He doesn't have the same stuff. Hasn't been a big strikeout guy, but he's pitched well. So this team will be good once again. And, of course, we will all overreact until the NCAA regional starts, and then we'll make the judgments for ourselves based off 3 weekends in the summer. So, all right, Hutch, let's wrap up there. Awesome to talk to you as always, my man, and appreciate everybody so much for tuning in. As always, follow Hutch at bestofarkansassports.com and myself at swtimes.com. Ton of content about Arkansas football and basketball and baseball stuff. I'm sure we'll start getting more consistent from here on out as well. Thank you guys again so much for listening. We'll be back next week to recap Tennessee, maybe preview the bye week, and maybe even talk a little bit more about baseball coming off the Fall Classic before that Oklahoma State series. So everyone have a great rest of your week and enjoy a Saturday night game inside Reynolds Razorback Stadium this weekend.